So I am on the line with James McPartland, who affectionately to me is known as Mac. And today we are talking about breakthroughs, how to create them, what to do with them, etc. So, Mac, I'd love for you just to do a little intro about yourself, what you did, what you're doing now, and then I'd love to just jump in and talk about breakthroughs.
It is an honor and pleasure to be with you here from sunny Southern California. What one might say is the nickel version of the 25-cent story is yours truly, Irish Catholic kid from Brooklyn, New York, with all of the attributes that go along with it, a combination of learning how to drink and consume secondhand smoke at a young age. Dad was in the tobacco business. I had a passion for health and fitness and sports, and really the driver for that was, like most young men, looking to get Dad's love and approval on things that were important to him, and for him it was work and watching television and love sports and also consuming mass quantities of alcohol. I learned how to do all three of those things, but gave up one of them, being the alcohol, because it just was impacting the other two. So I pursued sports in high school. I played football for 2 years in college. I got involved in the health and fitness space while I was in college. I also was working at bars, and I will tell you and all of your listeners, it was a lot more fun to work in nightclubs than it was putting large people in Nautilus machines back in college. And as life went on, I met some folks that wanted to put some money into a business. I put any money I could get, as well as some family money, into a small company that was known as Unison, became a company called Star Trek. I spent about almost 20 years helping build that business from a bankrupt business to I think it was about a $200 million US company. I was running it, so it would probably been $1 billion business, Alexandra, if I wasn't running it. Learned a lot along the way. Probably two things that will lead to your questions that I think are coming is in looking to develop the business, I saw something. I had a breakthrough, if I may, because I believe we're going to go down that path.
I love that you're using the word.
My mom and dad died at what I will tell you every year for me at a very young age. My father was 57, my mother was 61. And while I would tell you I thought lifestyle had most to do with it, alcohol, tobacco, stress, no exercise, I believe the largest contributing factor of their premature demise was they died with the music inside. They died of a broken heart. And that really crystallized for me in my professional career when people would come and go in our company, and I believed that they were buying into my dream and we were going to set the world on fire. And when a percentage of the employees, 3, 6, 12 months, whatever from their start date would leave, I would say what was wrong with them. And reality was it was nothing wrong with them. It was me. I was focusing on my dream, not theirs. And over time came to look at people in the organization in a way that speaks to that point I made about my parents. For the most part, people said yes to hearing my dream, not because of my dream, but because they needed a job. In reality, I was also a guy that looked over the top of cubicles to catch people doing something wrong. There's a name for that, but I can't say today because I don't know what the audience composure is or mixture is, and don't want to offend anybody on my first interview with you.
Right.
But over time, what I recognized is the folks in my organization, much like myself, perhaps some of your listeners and viewers, have the dream. As I like to say, they have a gift. And inside of them is that gift that when they're a child, they're invincible. As they get older, that gift perhaps gets pushed to the side, or that dream perhaps is lost. And in that my parents died of a broken heart, when I started to look at the organization and asking people what they wanted to be when they grew up, no matter what age they were, and was sincere about it and sought to support them, things shifted. And I had a lot of people say to me, listen, you can't talk to people about their dreams, their goals, and their ambitions, right? They've got a job to do. And I said, they're going to be thinking about it anyway. So that made a shift.
Right.
And so that led to, some great learnings. Those learnings often come from setbacks. And so I went into semi-retirement mode almost 10 years ago. And the quest to build a business did a couple of things for me. One is it gave me all those male-driven, ego-needed things where I had a full me wall and had material stuff. I was tremendously fit but unhealthy, going through a divorce, and there were some lessons that came along the way. And then the shift of taking those setbacks and transforming them into a force for good in my life for other people has led me down the path of a second marriage, 2 children, and work now in the area of corporate culture, which sort of mirrors the stuff that I mentioned in the first go-around of professional life, working with executives, speaking, and now book writing.
And the book you have written is?
Funny you should ask. I was just thinking about it. The book is called Unopened Gifts.
I have it in front of me.
I actually have one beside me. It's, as you would see by looking at it, and if there was a screen, we could show the viewers, it's Unopened Gifts, A Journey to Gratitude, and I wrote the book as what I intended to be an inspirational novel, business novel, story of a man forever in pursuit of the brass ring, almost loses everything he has because he doesn't recognize what he has, and it's always on to the next conquest. And like myself, and many folks I have come across in the game of life, the pursuit of things had me miss the now and or disappointed about what had happened or didn't happen in the past. So the book is a vehicle with which for people to read a story about this individual, meet his family, meet the folks that are involved in his business, and perhaps by reading the story they'll recognize one or several of the characters that speak to them about wherever they are in their life, so that there's something that serves them as they go down their road of life.
Beautiful. So it's interesting because you didn't say it this way, and I know our discussion today is about breakthroughs, but it sounds like you had a lot of them, because it sounds like you had, major staircase stepping moments, the way you describe your journey, to get from one state to another, I guess. It sounds like you had a lot of breakthroughs to get from one state to another. Is that accurate?
Well, guys like me are numbers driven, right? Want to achieve, and so I had to get as many breakthroughs as I could get. I think, kidding aside, the answer is yes. And what I actually found, interesting enough, is the things that I was resisting most are the things that we're trying to break through. And resistance is a muscle building exercise. It only gets stronger the more I was battling it. And so,
can you give an example? Like, I just love what you just said. I'm just trying to track it. Like an example of.
Oh, sure. It probably dovetails into what present life looks like. Or let's talk about the book. So I resisted writing a book for a long time. And I resisted writing the book because I allowed that voice inside of me to win the day more often than not, to say, who are you to write a book? What is it that you have to say that would be of interest to other people? And, there's thousands of books, and all those creations and the language and the stories that we develop inside of ourselves that create this illusion or this vision that we step into on a daily basis is what I was doing with my book. But it wouldn't go, the knocking on my heart or the knocking on the door to do it, it wouldn't subside. And when I stopped, if you will, and did something that is a practice regularly, because I don't know that we ever get it all the time. Some things have to be relearned or be reminded of, and a lot of what we talk about is reminders. It wasn't going to go away, and when I shifted from how selfish it would be, I'm going to try to write this book, to thinking, wait a minute, I have a gift, I've learned some things, and if there's one individual who could read something from this story and have a shift in their life based on what I've learned, not because I have great wisdom to teach, but that experience might speak to them wherever they are in their life, And isn't that what we're supposed to do, right? Make it a bit better by being here. So, if one starfish got tossed back on the ocean by that book, and further having children, I said, I want these guys one day to introduce me on a stage, and when they do, I don't want them to say, my dad sold thousands of widgets. What I wanted them to say was, my dad worked really hard to help people unlock their potential and recognize their gifts, and here's this body of work that he focused on to do that. So, that further helped me no longer battle the resistance.
Yeah, that's great. I needed to hear that. Just to get to the language part, how would you define a breakthrough?
I would say there's a couple of ways I'd simplify it, which is always helpful to me, is a reduction in stress. And by that I mean, we may have touched on this, but certainly your viewers wouldn't have known this. And I repeat it because it serves me, because as I say, sometimes repetition is very helpful. But I believe one of the drivers of stress in our life, and stress can be very positive, but one of the drivers of negative stress is that daunting feeling that there's something we're supposed to do that we're not doing. Or we know we're supposed to do something and we don't do it. And we'll get to it later, we push it aside. And so a breakthrough comes when, for me, my experience has been when I do what I believe I should do for the reasons that I believe I should do it, which again is an attempt to be transformative to help and serve other people, that when I don't do it, it sits with me, it speaks to me, it knocks on, it just follows me around like a shadow. And when I do it, probably like most anybody else, when you take an action that you've been thinking about for a long time, the longest part of that experience is the nagging feeling I need to do something. When I finally sit down and do what I need to do, it doesn't take much time at all. So the breakthrough comes when that less feeling of stressing, I took an action in the direction of a dream.
So I'm going to track with you. I still have another question about breakthroughs and how we create them, but you just went to action. So how do you create action around a breakthrough? How do you move from that breakthrough moment, that experience, the way that you said it was, or should I ask, are you saying that you're listening to your intuition and then acting on it? So I guess flushing that point out, how do we make actionable the breakthrough? And then are you saying that when you really listen to your intuition, that's part of the breakthrough?
Can I answer all that with just the word yes?
Sure.
Of course I can. I'm the guest.
Exactly.
So, I think if as learnings have come, I have had this illusion that, when I embarked on something, it had to be successful, right? And procrastination, in my case, is often the fear of doing something that if I do it and it doesn't go well, I'll be judged, right?
Yeah.
So it's easier to procrastinate on it. And so what I have learned and continue to be inspired by is when I get stuck on the action side of things, I have a couple of things that serve me. One is, nothing happens without action, right? I think one of the jokes in various communities that at least I've been associated with when people talk about the law of attraction, I know when I sat around willing things to happen, I almost lost my furniture, right?
I know. I'm going to make $1 million and dream that a check is coming to my mailbox.
And that was the mortgage guy. I'm coming to take your house, pal. And nothing happens in life without action. And while that's simple, it doesn't mean it's easy. And so I think of two things when I'm stuck. One is I know if I get stuck in my head, meaning thinking about it and letting the voices enter, that I'll go into stall mode, right? Stall mode, an airplane crashes. And so I think about two things. One is a phrase you and I spoke about earlier in a different conversation is, don't get it perfect, get it going. And further, I can look at reference points and I can go to my library or people I know, and any great innovation, product, success, family, business, church, university didn't start that way. And you used the word earlier, being pivot. If any great success story has come from shifting and moving and learning and developing new concepts and meeting new people and asking questions and falling down and getting up, it's being really clear about what you want and why you want it. And my belief is if you know how to do it, then your dream isn't big enough. And
that's great.
Further, that there's a lot of people who have done this kind of stuff before, and it's a sign of strength to ask for help. And a great question I have with people is, look, here's what I'm trying to get to, right? Be courageous enough to be vulnerable, which people really appreciate, I've found. But a good question is, look, I'm going down this path. I'm trying to do this. And if you were me, what would you do? And, if people know me and respect me, they'll give me good answers. If they don't, they'll say, if I were you, I'd give up on it. And I don't listen to those folks. But successful people will help you. And most of the ideas, concepts, and thoughts we have, there are models out there to emulate. And it's just about being prepared to fail forward in that quest of something that you know is important to you and you know why it is.
Right. So, one, I heard you say, take the action of doing research. If it's something outside, breakthrough obviously is outside your realm of knowing or experiencing. And two, I heard you say, get people to rally around you in a way, or, get some, not agreement, but get some support or create support, right?
Well, yes, and I would add a third step.
Mm-hmm.
Learn by doing.
Okay.
So if I wanted to ride a bike, I could do great research about bikes and bike riding. I could get around cyclists and say, you guys support me. But unless I go out there on the bike, right, and fall down a few times and learn how to pedal and learn how to clip in and learn how to ride hills and learn how to eat food on the bike, etc., it won't do me any good. And as you know from your own training and experience, that the only really way to learn it is to get on the court, right, and attempt to do it. And so it is all about not being afraid of failing, but pivoting. And, one of the things that held me back for many years and was to look externally, which I think we have all a tendency to do by some degree, looking externally for validation, right? And because I know we all want to know that we're affirmed, we're loved, we're measured up, we make a difference. I think that's part of our DNA. And when I have had the experience, and it's never all or nothing, and it still comes back, where I look at the world as if the people in my surroundings are like Olympic judges holding up scorecards, right? That guy's got a 4, and that guy's got a 6, and what do I do with that 7? Where's the 10, right? And,
absolutely.
And I come to find out the hard, cold facts is those folks aren't holding up cards thinking about me. They're not thinking about me at all. They're thinking about themselves, maybe their own scores.
That's right. That's so great, yeah. That's a great realization, one of which I'm trying to have. So back to this breakthrough, how you create them. Is your sense that you can have breakthroughs sitting on a mountaintop on your own? And I know people have them that way. Or do you need a container? Do you need to be in an environment? Do you need to be with others? What's your take on that, especially with your coaching with CEOs, because I'm sure you're creating breakthroughs for them, with them?
Yeah, great question. I think it's a cumulative process, meaning, it's sort of like, as you asked the question, which makes me think of the business community, it's almost like taking a team of executives and say, now you guys get in that room at 2 o'clock and innovate, and you'd be done by 3, right? It doesn't happen.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't happen, right? Something will happen iteratively, right? Where there's a conversation, there's a failed product launch, if you will, or a setback in a relationship, and a willingness to learn and understand and grow, and not to find fault, but to find understanding. So if that individual gets to the mountaintop and has a breakthrough, I think it has a heck of a lot to do with the preceding weeks, months, and perhaps years of that individual's life that has fostered that moment. where
that is so great. I've never thought about it like that. That even on the mountaintop, you're actually bringing all that you've experienced with you, so you're really never alone. That's fascinating. Never thought about it like that.
So I've had it, on a run. As people sing in the shower, I don't do that because people get hurt when I sing. So it's in the shower, or it's driving, or you flip into a magazine, or you see a billboard that's got a sign, or someone's got something on their T-shirt. It can come a variety of ways if one's open to it. I mean, the messages will come.
It's really, really good. From my own personal experience, and I know this is different for everyone, I do need to put myself in a container, or for me, putting myself in an environment where the agenda to have a breakthrough, particular learning environments like the Landmark environment, or I do something in New York called the Evolutionary Collective, or retreat. I've done a lot of stuff over the years. I'm about to do some John DeMartini work. I feel like the very act of committing and being in an environment where that's the point creates the possibility of the breakthrough. But I know that's not true for everyone. For you, how would you say the majority of yours, or where have they occurred?
The majority of the experiences for me?
Of your breakthroughs, yeah.
Yeah, because for a number of years I was so busy working, I wasn't doing the education work that I'm very focused on for example, over the last 10 years. And so for me, I could tell, as I said to you earlier, where I was having resistance, and that started to signal to me that there's something I was supposed to be paying attention to. And so either when I finally let go, or got in an environment where somebody was speaking about something that had been, trying to bust out of my body, when I became aware of the fact that, the body is both an incredible pharmacy and an incredible university, that if I just trusted, things could come to me. So I had not. So today, I can say to you that I can look at an accelerated opportunity to strengthen my transformational experiences and add to them in contained environments. But that has a lot to do with sort of that point of being on the mountain, of all the stuff I'll bring along when I get in that room, and I can be really focused on it. But I think for the benefit of your listeners, I think it's important to know that for some of us, it doesn't have to be that, but that sure as heck accelerates the process and increases the likelihood of future breakthroughs if one exposes themselves to the stimulating, the thought leaders that can help us see things from a new angle. Right.
And I certainly have a propensity to need that kind of kick in the gluteus maximus, one could say. Whereas, if I'm on my own, I'm not necessarily going to generate it in the same way. But yeah, everybody is different in that regard. I guess because we've already heard so many of your kind of crucible moments that then catapults you to the next moment, and it sounds like your life now is about contributing to others. One of the things I've been thinking about that gets us in action from that breakthrough experience is this whole notion of looking at our existing world, not once we've had the breakthrough, but like before the breakthrough, and then looking back to that world that we're living in front of the breakthrough, and looking at it to see how we can then shape it to support this new self that we are, this new human being that we've become because of the breakthrough, and that if we don't do that, we're likely just to go back. And the perfect example is, if I want to lose 50 pounds and I'm in an environment where there's a lot of junk food in my kitchen, or, the culture of my family is to eat unhealthy and eat high calories and high fat, if I don't impact that environment and impact those people and help shape that support system, that, the sustainability of my breakthrough is not as high. The the likelihood is that I will return to the way that I was. And I know you did that in your own fitness endeavor and created a community, because how many Ironmans have you done?
They weren't beautiful, but they were, I got the T-shirts, 9.
Okay, so not many people can say they've done 9 Ironmans in their life, and I'm sure there was a lot of other competitive events around even 9 Ironmans. So how did you shape your environment to succeed and sustain, the level of the life of an athlete? Because from what your stories that you have told me is that you didn't start off as an athlete in your maybe early 30s, or I'm not sure your age. So this whole notion of recreating, reshaping your environment to support your breakthrough, what are your thoughts about that? It's a long-winded question.
It's a lot more fun to work on becoming the before picture, but I don't do that anymore. So I think it is fair to say, who you're around is who you become, right? Because it rubs off on you. And so, in the simple and kind example of Ironman, if one wants to participate in that event, you need the support and folks who've done it before, and also, someone who's going to respond positively to you saying, look, I've got to go out and ride 100 miles or 200 kilometers today. You in? And that's a small group. And something else that comes to mind as you ask the question, and I have done this often in my life, if there's something, comparison's a dangerous thing, and I did a lot of that in my life, whereby which I would see an individual, where they lived, how their life was unfolding, and I would then compare that to where I'm at, thinking, oh man, how come I'm not, right? And that there's a tendency I've come across, both personal experience and I see, where one could look at an individual in that example, comparing themselves to, somebody on their Super Bowl day to, I myself in training camp thinking, how come I'm not in the Super Bowl? And what I've come to find serves me better, is, where am I? That individual is focusing on their potential and really pulling what they've got. What is it that they're doing different? And this will further your question around building support systems. So I tend to ask myself questions these days when I come across people that are doing really fascinating or unique or stimulating things. I ask myself, hey, I wonder what that person spends their time thinking about, how they think. I listen for the type of language they use, because words paint pictures. I then ask, what's the community or communities, because often there are several. Who's rubbing off on them? How are they spending their time? What are the groups they associate with? Who's helping raise their game? And not that I would want to completely follow that, but that model works really well, because there's a lot to be said, and science will prove it. If there are specific outcomes one is looking for, it's certainly how one interprets the world. It's how one uses words and thoughts and pictures and images. It's how that's reinforced by the communities that we surround ourselves with, and how we picture what we want, speak about what we want, have that engagement with other people, and seek to bring that in a community environment by enrolling others in that journey. So I guess the very important point of all that is the folks that are on your support squad are absolutely vital to doing anything you want to do of significance in your life.
I'd love to know your thoughts on being committed to something bigger than yourself as a way to create the sustainability around the breakthrough. Because, again, the example of the trainer who takes that client and says, okay, in a year, there's a marathon in my local city, in our local city. Like, why don't we, I'll commit you to that, and then we'll reverse engineer it and get you to it. So what's your, that's definitely a commitment bigger than your reality at that moment. That's not a bigger than yourself community commitment, but it's a commitment bigger than the self that in that moment. What are your thoughts around that?
Don't do it.
Don't do it?
It hurts. It's painful.
Given that's what you did.
Yes. I would, as an aside, and being this male ego who's trying to keep that in check. So one year I was on this quest of a foolish Irishman's bet on these marathons And it started out with handicapping people to run one specific event, which then led to who could run a marathon a month for the longest period of time until the first guy or gal dropped out. And, you know, I can look back and say to your viewers quite comfortably, that was a dumb bet. It was a painful bet. But, you know, as I was, you know, full of myself about that, I came across an individual, you know, this is 3 or 4 marathons into the year, who was running with a crowd, and there was cameramen and people on scooters and all this stuff, and I thought, I wonder who this cat is, right? Probably an interesting guy. Went up beside him, and it was a Sunday, I think it was Berlin, and as I'm talking to him, he's not happy, he's using foul language, and I won't share, and he's really, you know, just disappointed in how his run is going. And I'm looking at all these people around him, and I asked him, why is he so unhappy? And he said because he had run, in marathon terms, he was a 3-hour marathoner, and he was on a track to run almost 4 hours this particular day. And yesterday, and this now remember in Germany, in England he had run one in under 3 hours. And as I look around at the people, there's a community from the Guinness Book of World Records tracking this guy who was out to set the world record of 112 marathons in a year. And
wow.
Here I am boldly going after one a month. I think I'll just run into my hotel room and go to sleep. You know. So now that I've shared that story, would you repeat the question?
I think I might have forgotten the question after the thought of doing that many marathons in a year makes my head spin. Being committed to something bigger than yourself, yeah. Yeah,
you know, so whether it's a marathon or something, a couple of things maybe to leave you with on this one. You know, a trainer saying, look, I'm going to plant the flag here for you, you ought to go do this, maybe that's the right thing to do. You know, I'll come back to saying to the individual who might have to embark upon that, why? Right? And if there's a strong enough why, if that makes sense, if it's congruent with your goals, man, you've got to go for it. If it's an external focus, because the trainer says do it, it won't be sustainable, right? So it's most importantly that it comes from internally, that the motive on it, even if the motive is because I want to do one or I want to say I did one, that's fine. That's great. But the you know, the long and short of it is something bigger than oneself. It is something that's humbling to think about for me. And if I come back to talking about my mom and my dad leaving the world at a young age, and I can look at my young children right now, and I think about my book, I tend to look at it this way, or I attempt with frequency to look at it this way. You know, and for your listeners, if I could give them a verbal visual. So, you know, I believe that, you know, prior to birth, when we're on the assembly line, and, you know, depending on one's belief system, let's say you're up with God or the angels or whomever it is, and you're on the table and, you know, 2 eyes, you know, 2 ears, put a nose in here, give this guy a couple of arms, right? This one's definitely a guy, make sure you put that in the right place, all that stuff, right? Then inserted into the mothership, shot down to Earth, blasted out 9 months later, ta-da, right? And without the manual, right? You get the test before you get the lesson plan.
That's right, I did that.
And so what's interesting about it, and I see it in my children, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? I could be Batman, Superman, Spider-Man. I could be Emmett from the Lego movie. I'm unstoppable. You know, somewhere here soon they're going to learn the real distinction between right and wrong. And that'll be coloring between the lines and go along to get along. And that's a fearful moment for me if I can't help them shape what that means to their ultimate life. But if we all get a life assignment and we each get inserted with a couple of gifts on that assembly line, I believe that our one of the life assignments is to figure out what those gifts are, unwrap them, and spend the better part of our life giving those gifts away so that they replenish. And when I get stressed out, another indication of that is it's playing not to lose as opposed to playing to win. And so what helps me about something bigger than myself is, all right, I get X amount of years on the planet and I've got X amount of gifts. And if I want my children to say, you know, this dude really worked hard to help people make a difference, and then I got to get on it. And if I'm going to do that, then I can't be afraid to get on this show with you today. I can't be afraid I can be afraid, but I can push through it, right? Because this show today is not about me. Let me tell you about myself. It's hoping that someone tunes in, hears something from you or me, snaps their fingers, go, bam, that's that on the mountain moment. That spoke to me. I got something out of that, right? That's why we do it. And I may never know, and it's not important that I do know. It's just important I know that that's the intention. And so not knowing, and, maybe sort of something I'll share, well, and as part of these closing comments, I would express to those that tune into your program the illusion of time, right? Everybody who does something significant has something we all have, and that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Mother Teresa had it. Leonardo da Vinci has it. Richard Branson has it. You have it. I have it.
Right.
But one of the things we don't know is how many of those 24/7s we have, right, in the pipe. And in November of last year, and you know this story, I picked up my brother off of the airport, coming off a flight to see my family for Thanksgiving. And within an hour of picking him up at the airport, a man who was battling addictions, a man whom I believed was about to turn the corner in his PhD and that life series of setbacks to use a platform of that addiction to say, look, if I can, you can, we can beat this thing, let's go. And as you and I have spoken, that's a large community. But the important part of telling that story is, within an hour picking him up at the airport, he had a massive seizure and died in the vehicle, right, sitting right beside me. And so when I think...
With your kids in the car, right?
With my children in the car.
Yeah.
And so the point of that is, the illusion we have of someday I'll, and I get to it tomorrow, and maybe, yes, I can, but I got to get to this first. And I think we all have a life assignment. There is something we're supposed to do, or we get to do. We don't have to do, but we get to do. That's an empowering part of it. And
that's really great. I love that. Get to do, not have to do. Yeah.
Yeah. And so to the extent we can look at it that way from time to time and what's most important and not knowing how much time we have and have the courage to play big because people aren't thinking about us. They're thinking about themselves anyway, right?
Yes.
Throw some starfish back in the ocean, and it feels a hell of a lot better doing something for somebody else than it does for ourselves.